I want to start by asking each of you just very briefly to tell everybody what your organization does, what you do within it, because I think it will help to frame the conversation. Amrit, you first, please.
Sure. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Mass Innovation Labs. We're a new concept in the life science biotech industry. We call ourselves an accelerated commercialization space. It's effectively a place that companies come to in industry, independent companies, whether they're startups or mid-sized biotech companies, and we do the entire infrastructure, growth, operations, and resources for these groups. We plan it for their immediate needs, their 6-month needs, their 3-year needs. So we've had immense success so far. We have a couple of gene editing companies.
And they pay you, or you invest in them, or both?
Sometimes both. Mostly it's a fee for service, but we do in some cases invest in some of these companies. No strings attached, just if it fits.
Okay, terrific. Lesley, I know that J-Labs is part of Johnson & Johnson.
Correct.
Explain if you would.
Yeah, so we're a part of Johnson & Johnson Innovation, and Johnson & Johnson Innovation was formed with the express purpose to invest in, catalyze, and support entrepreneurs to bring their dreams of solutions to patients and consumers. And so J-Labs is just one pillar of that mission, which is the catalysis part. So we are also a capital efficient model for healthcare startups to come and start their business and grow it without having to spend all of their capital that they've brought into the company to date on space. And so we have shared equipment, shared lab space, and services and capabilities, and we do a lot of educational program, and we bring in a lot of enabling people and groups together to help build a community in the areas that we have these programs, no strings attached.
And this is obviously going to be germane to our conversation, but is this meant to fill some sort of hole in J&J's ability to develop drugs?
So the return on investment for Johnson & Johnson is all about visibility into interesting new innovations, because we are still we're one of the few healthcare companies that still has diagnostics, devices, pharmaceuticals, and consumer business. We bring in companies for in all of those areas that are doing innovative, interesting, new solutions. Many of these companies are in our strategic areas of interest, but it is not a requirement.
And your point is that most of your competitors would be one of the three, not all of the three,
Correct.
One or two of the three. Okay, I don't know, Jonathan, I don't know if you're going to say that McKinsey doesn't do anything, no strings attached, I assume, the way they said. We know what McKinsey is, but you're running something called the Pharmaceutical Analytics Venture at McKinsey. Could you tell everyone what that is?
Sure, thanks, Adam. So we, within the pharmaceutical and medical products practice, have launched a new venture, a Center for Analytics and Real-World Evidence. In this center, we apply advanced analytics to new challenges within big data. So there's a lot of big data, it's getting a lot of hype in healthcare. But what I mean when I talk about that are things like RX or medical claims, genomics data, and especially electronic medical records. Putting these things together and applying advanced analytics to them, such things as machine learning or cognitive computing, to improve pharmaceutical research and development efforts.
So just so we're clear, it sounds like you're making a software product, or no?
So what's really great about McKinsey is that we're in conversations at a very strategic level. But those conversations need to connect with some of the scientific thinking that's really going to impact drug discovery. And so what we do is we build visualizations on top of this data so that you can explore some of the conclusions that you make and to understand better the situation of the product, how it's addressing unmet medical need, problems with adherence or adverse events, and better understand the entire landscape for a pharmaceutical product.
Okay, great. So now you know who's going to explain both the problem and the solution to you, and we're going to set the problem up, and then we're going to knock it down. Julie, I want to start with you, and start at the high level. Why does it still take so long, and why does it still cost so much money?
Well, it takes so long because only 5 to 6% of programs that start at the discovery stage, the beginnings and the amazing exploration that these scientists are doing, only 5 out of 100 make it to a treatment that a patient can take. So in that respect, if you've got a 95% failure rate, it's going to take a very long time for one to make it. And we are a very highly regulated industry. That also takes a very long time to weave your way to make sure that you are bringing safe and effective treatments to patients.
Has that 5% been a constant in modern times?
Pretty much.
And are you trying to improve that figure or not necessarily?
We're always trying to improve it. The J&J innovation has a lot to do with trying to improve that from the perspective of having an eye into what people are doing, but also bringing the resources of J&J and the knowledge base of J&J to the innovators so that we can help them in areas where they may not have the same expertise that we do.
Amrit, the way I hear Lesley say this, did I call you Julie a moment
You did.
ago? Yeah, I apologize. I heard it way back here. I'm sorry. The way I hear Lesley articulate this, this is the way it is. Do you agree?
I think in a large part, the cost, time, and effort that goes on in drug development has been a constant for the last 30 or so odd years. We are seeing massive changes today in how we're trying to change that effort and change the infrastructural problems that come along with that. Our organization was founded off the principle that we can change and accelerate the beginning part of that early development, increase the chance of success, and actually reduce that time to milestone. And I think that we have to. I think that the rapid development of new technologies that are coming out, whether it's CRISPR-Cas9, as we've heard about earlier today, which is really game-changing in the industry of early-stage R&D, or others that are coming out day after day in immuno-oncology or protein chemistry, it's requiring research teams to think differently than they have for the last 20 years.
Yeah, and even the 3D printing of organs and organ tissue.
Yeah, absolutely. It used to be that larger organizations and research groups would go off and set up these very vertical monoliths of research where they would do, this is an entire department of small molecule chemistry, this is an entire animal program surrounding oncology. And what we're finding now is that both large pharma as well as more nimble small startups are identifying that they have to rapidly change what they're doing, being able to pivot from today we're doing chemistry, tomorrow we're doing tissue culture, the next day we're doing computational biology.
Yep.
And so we are looking at how do you address and actually accommodate those companies that are growing from the 1, 5, 10-person research teams that really go to J Labs and have a spectacular experience giving a promotion here. They're industry changing, and what a pharma has done to really support early stage life science, taking that team of people and building it into a 50 to 100-person platform company that can go off and raise $500 million, $1 billion. In 2015, we launched our company in May, and since then, this type of really looking at that infrastructure problem, our 9 startups have raised $4 billion.
Well, and that's a point in time when these companies often can stumble and fall.
Absolutely.
When they get past the I'm really good at discovery or I'm really good at the early stage research and now I have to expand and I have to commercialize it or move it toward. They don't know how to do that and they don't know how to hire the right people to do it. And so having those resources, it's an amazing. I think it can help to speed it up.
Yeah.
You mentioned at the outset that this is a highly regulated industry we're talking about. You didn't mention FDA specifically, but could you all talk about that? My understanding is that nothing is going to speed up that process. Is that true? Yeah. Jonathan, go ahead, please.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting. I think there's a widespread recognition now within the FDA that the clinical trial process is recognized as almost a parallel universe. It's an amazing thing. We study the heck out of these products, these therapeutics, either biologics or small molecules, through clinical trials. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars on them, and then we kind of throw them over the wall into the so-called real world, into the clinic, and then don't pay much attention to efficacy or safety after that unless forced. I think that there's a much more of a recognition now from the FDA to pay attention to how the efficacy and safety profile changes when more patients are being treated. And then going hand in glove with that is a greater recognition of the use of real-world data as just another evidence type to impact clinical trials. I think that the clinical trial paradigm, which has served us so well for the past 45 years, I think really is on its last legs. It's going to be changing enormously in the next 4 or 5 years to the point where we probably won't even recognize it. With this influx of other data sets that come in that are really going to lend evidence, perhaps not pivotal evidence at first, but directly towards approvals.
So following up on that, the FDA is changing, and it's being forced to change because the way science is being done is fundamentally changing. Precision medicine, where you're talking about creating a drug for an individual patient, is becoming more and more investigated and may become the norm in the future in some cases for immuno-oncology, for other areas of therapy. We currently work with a company that plans on sequencing each patient's tumor and then creating a portfolio of drugs per patient. And they've already worked with the FDA to identify what they need from a pipeline perspective to do and a regulatory perspective to be able to get through that process.
What's that company?
It's called Gritstone Oncology.
And that process would not have been available to them at the FDA X years ago? Or
5 years ago, 10 years ago.
No, not at all.
You couldn't even imagine that.
No. And the other thing I think that's going to help to speed it up is the application of some of these really exciting technologies to the preclinical work that's being done to get the program to the FDA. Because, for example, these being able to get 3D printed tissue to actually test for side effects, or being able to use the CRISPR-Cas9 for preclinical models can actually decrease the time that it takes to get into patients and could really increase the success rate.
Talking about CRISPR-Cas9 specifically, we talk about the therapeutic uses and the end uses of the technology directly in crops and biotechnology in patients. We are at a point in time in early stage research. And again, scientific research is iterative. You go through an experiment, you find the results, you change it, you redo an experiment. And it's this long process. The life cycle of an experiment is getting smaller and smaller. So the new technologies coming out in synthetic biology, using CRISPR in animal models, doing other things is drastically reducing that time of experiment. So where it used to be we run 20 iterative experiments in 24 months, you're doing that now in 2 months or 3 months. There are computational biology companies out there that are taking disease models and designing them in 6 weeks. That used to be a year-long process for a pharma company. So we are finding that, as we go on, this process is going to shorten for the preclinical work, for getting to an IND, for being able to approach the FDA with really comprehensive data.
And so would it be fair to say that while you're not forecasting, none of you is forecasting a change in the success rate, you are envisioning a shortening of the, let's say, time to success or time to failure?
Yes, but I actually think we might be able to affect the success rate with some of these new technologies, to be able to weed out the things that are going to be either ineffective or toxic.
Jonathan, we sort of ticked at or winked at machine learning and artificial intelligence. Can you go a little deeper? What else are you looking at?
Right, so here's what's so exciting. I mean, we're talking about these discovery platform technologies. So Rachel presented on Caribou's work with CRISPR. You can look at some of the single cell sorting technologies like QuantaCell, some of the companies trying to address hard to drug proteins like transmembrane proteins like a QIAGEN. These are new technologies that hold enormous promise, almost independent of what therapy area, what indication. They're a new way to drug proteins. And so you put this together with machine learning. So you take genomics data like the work that's being done at Vanderbilt University, where they're tying together electronic medical records with patients' genomics data. You can characterize targets so much more effectively than we could even 12 months ago. And so you put that together with a new discovery platform that produces a clinical candidate for a protein that couldn't be drugged before, and you're in a fundamentally different paradigm. So I'm, enormously optimistic about the changes for both success rates and addressing attrition rates and also shrinking the length of clinical trials.
Could one of you briefly address the topic that came up earlier in the afternoon that I think all of you are more or less focused on treating, curing diseases? What about this notion that we need to find a way to invest far more in prevention?
Sure. So I can talk about that because J&J has publicly talked about the fact that we are now working in prevention. And so we have taken a couple of different disease areas where we are very, very focused on prevention. One of those is type 1 diabetes. We know type 1 diabetes is an immune disease, an autoimmune disease. And so can we find any therapies, any interventions that we can, and there are signals years before the patient actually becomes diabetic. And can we find therapies that will help stave that off? Lung cancer is another place where we know what causes lung cancer, right?
Yeah.
And it is often diagnosed much too late. What can we do with society in collaboration to try and cut down on the behaviors or just work on diagnosing it earlier and treating it earlier?
And so in the first case, you discuss a therapy, so that's how you can get paid.
Correct.
In the latter case,
It's a consumer smoking cessation model.
but J&J doesn't get paid for that.
We have consumer products.
So you can sell more of them to the people who are alive.
It's a whole model, right? This is going to be behavior change, right? This could be. You could see. So yes, we have smoking cessation products at Johnson & Johnson.
I see.
But imagine linking that with a social media or an app or something like that. There's ways that we can think about it, and different approaches that we can take in today's world.
Let's please have some questions. I'm looking particularly for Mike Ray. Are you out there somewhere? There you are. Please.
Really interesting question, and I think you just raised a really interesting point, which is who gets paid and how. So IDEA every year publishes a Productive Innovation Index, which is a rank of which pharma company is able to launch innovation and how they rank. J&J has been top for 5 of the 6 years. The biggest issue that we see is that people talk about invention a lot, but they're not really talking about innovation. Innovation is what you launch, it's not just what you discover. So putting this thing in and the rates aren't changing, most of the problems are with the humans that are making the decisions about what goes forward. So I'd be interested in asking the panel, maybe particularly Lesley, what it is about the diversity of the J&J culture that's helping the decision-making internally.
I think that the internal culture at J&J has been focused on once we see a signal of success, what is the fastest way that we can get the solution to the patient, or what is the fastest way that we can make the go, no-go decisions. And that has been, and so we have that as the fundamental background, but we also have focused on very specific areas that we know we're good at and that where we have extreme competencies. And we have created cross-departmental teams so that we aren't all just talking in one vertical silo, so that everybody now, so we have these larger teams and people have the ability to take things forward based on evidence.
Lesley, as we wrap, would you share with everybody we said we were going to talk about speed and length of time. Would you share the conundrum that you've talked about what happens over the course of this decade that it often takes to develop new therapies, new treatments?
Yeah, so one of the things that has always concerned me, and this has been for much of my career, is that we are in this incredible era today of how fast we're learning about biology and the incredible advancements that we're making. And I've always had this concern about by the time something gets to market, perhaps it's irrelevant. Or, there's something else coming behind it that is going to be so much better. And so I think this is a constant conundrum that we worry about, and I would love to hear what other people think about this problem.
It's really significant. We see companies today that are about to launch drugs in the market that, as a scientist, you look at and say, man, the new technology is going to completely wipe this away in 5 to 7 years.
Yeah, we know better than this.
Yeah,
right?
we already do. I think what's really interesting is going back to the previous question about how is innovation changing and how is, if any, innovation being broken down today. Pharma has evolved over the last 30 years. It used to be all vertical. Pharma would do the early stage, they would do all the support research, they would do all the development. And what pharma's realized over time is that they are remarkably efficacious at doing development. You guys are the experts at being able to take a great product and bring it to market. But there's so much diversity in the research that's going on. Over the last really 10 to 15 years, pharma has looked externally very heavily at being able to make partnerships, explore university and industry partnerships, to be able to capture and promote innovation and get access to innovation much faster and much wider scope. And so this trend was actually, I think, one of the pioneers was Johnson & Johnson and J&J Innovation, and really recognizing that and making it a central tenet of its R&D program, having a healthy internal R&D program and looking externally. But it's a problem that every pharma looks at today, and everyone has a different approach to.
So Adam, I know you need to wrap. I have a slightly different view on this, which is that the 10-year cycle, while it's true from maybe early discovery through approval, it's a solid number. I think we need to stop thinking, though, about the transition from phase 3 to approval as kind of the end of the life cycle. Actually, there's an enormous amount of value to be captured after a pharmaceutical launch. I mean, if you look at label expansions and efforts beyond the label, Celgene has been a pioneer in this area, where you find new ways to benefit patient from an approved drug. And in fact, Celgene, was founded upon reformulations of thalidomide, the cause of the 1974 Drug Act that kind of launched the current paradigm of clinical trials. So I think beyond the approval, there's a lot of opportunity to bring benefit to patients, and that cycle doesn't end after 10 years.